Here at It Starts With Me, we like to keep it as unfiltered as possible. But as a courtesy to our guests and audiences, we would like to inform you that this episode may contain trigger warnings like sexual and mature topics. Viewer discretion is advised. It Starts With Me is a podcast that explores the transitional phenomena of time and chance, where it starts with you and it starts with me. Thank you and enjoy the show.
What's going on, everybody? It's Joel back again from the Tenacity Foundation with another It Starts With Me podcast. So glad to have you all here with me on today. We're going to have a great show today. We have the couple, Roane and Eve Hunter, and today we're going to have the interview with Roane. So this is going to be a great show, and we'll give you a little more information about that in just a moment. First, let's talk about what happens at the beginning of the week, right? So in the beginning of the week on Mondays, my co-host from the Community Beacon has his very own show called Motivational Mike Monday. On Monday, he will be there at 9 o'clock p.m. He discusses all different types of things from how to start a business, how to run your business, and also real estate, as well as some different things. He has a great show. It's about 15 minutes long. Tune in on Mike Seville at YouTube. Also, every single Wednesday, we have this show. It Starts With Me, where it's all about learning the transitional phenomena inside of people that take advantage of time and chance to make the best decisions that they can possibly make, changing the trajectory of their life. So we're hoping that you all will be inspired by the different things that people have gone through and how they've made it through. That's It Starts With Me every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Also, on Friday, you'll have us back here again, Community Beacon. You'll be able to see us there on YouTube. The podcast is wherever you find your podcast. Remember, the YouTube station is Tenacity Foundation. We're going to have the Community Beacon where we start off at 6:30 every single Friday, and that is all about helping people to gain a greater or a freer mindset, right? Hopefully that'll help them to change what they're doing inside their life and become more free inside of their life. So remember, comment, click, share, follow, love, reach out to us. We love to hear from you. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Roane. Roane Hunter is into, Roane and Eva are into marriage and family counseling. They specialize in individuals, couples, and family therapy. Their private practice based in Madison, Mississippi includes 16 therapists across 3 locations. They are both licensed professional counselors, national board certified counselors, certified sex addiction therapists and supervisors, certified clinical sex addiction specialists, clinical associates with the American Board of Christian Sex Therapists, and certified multiple addictions therapist supervisors. They are world conference speakers for the American Association of Christian Counselors. That sounds huge, right? They have a book. So their book is called Sex, God, and the Chaos of Betrayal, the couple's roadmap of hope and healing, recovery from infidelity, affairs, pornography, and sexual addiction, is an international bestseller in 8 countries across multiple categories. This is going to be a great one. At this time, let's bring Roane to the front.
Man, thanks, Joel.
Yeah.
I just want you to read that intro again, man. I feel special or something. I'm just a dumb country boy from Mississippi. I don't know. It's just kind of surreal to hear all that.
Yeah, I don't think so. You may be from Mississippi, but you're not dumb. That's for sure.
Yeah, man, glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. This is a beautiful thing. I know that you all are really, really productive in Mississippi. You are definitely putting in the work, helping a lot of people. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, I mean, what's going on in your world today?
Man, we always tell people it's just every now and then we come up for air. We're wide open. I used to be in the corporate salt mines. I spent 25 years in the real world in corporate sales, and um, I, I I was pretty successful, and I thought I worked hard, but now I actually do work hard. And I do that because I love what I do. Eva loves what she does, and we love what we do together. And so, yeah, things have just really opened up for us. And man, God just keeps opening doors. And I tell people, man, I'm riding the wave. Yeah, we're just rolling with it for sure.
That that's pretty awesome. I love that I love the way that you express that. You're an extremely humble individual, and I could tell that from the first moment that we began to speak. So I'm definitely grateful to be able to have this conversation with you at this time. I guess what I would ask you in the very beginning was, how did you get here? What brought you to this moment?
Man, I always, I read all this stuff in a textbook in counseling school, and I started doing therapy. I wish, I always ask God. It's like, God, do I have to go through all this stuff I work with in order to help people? Because that's how we got here. Um, yeah, Eve and I we both grew up in small town Mississippi. I always say that like there's something else in Mississippi besides small towns. Um, and we were high school sweethearts, and yeah, that's where it all started. And uh, really, where it all started for me, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. I grew up. We farmed a big farm, about 4,000 acres, and I had two older brothers that were 4 and 5 years older. And growing up in that environment, man, that's boy heaven, right? Horses and cows and tractors and dogs and hunting and fishing, and or as we say in Mississippi, hunting and fishing. There's no G on the end of either one of those, but it really was. What a great place to grow up and to be a boy. And my two older brothers were my demigods, and man, we did what you're supposed to do as boys. And then the first great tragedy in my life, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and my mother, I always say I don't think the ink was dry on the divorce papers when she remarried. Later in life, my brothers and I came up with our affectionate name. We couldn't call him stepfather because he didn't have a father bone in his body. And so that movie came out, Meet the Fockers, and we kind of came up with the name Stepfocker because that's what he was, right?
Oh
He
man.
wasn't much of a father or anything, and so we just really tried to stay away. And my mother was. They had my little sister after 2 years of them being married, and so that kind of became her new little family. And we were kind of turned over to. I say we were organic children way before that was popular. We just kind of raised ourselves, right? I say I was raised by wolves. My surrogate fathers were my two older brothers and their 4 and 5 year older buddies, and so I just ran with the wolf pack. And so it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. There were no rules, not much of any kind of parental involvement. And so we just kind of figured life out, and we figured a lot of stuff out, most of it not good. And Eve and I started dating. We were 15 years old. I mean, we knew each other, but we really began know each other and started dating at 15. And of course, we started having sex pretty quickly. And we was two different worlds, because I grew up with no rules and no nothing, and Eva grew up in a good little. Her mom and dad were involved in a little Baptist church and very involved. And in her house, there were rules, and more rules, and you made up rules about rules, because that's how you grow up in a little country Baptist church and most rigid religious systems. And so she met me and thought it was pretty cool. She could get a beer out of the refrigerator. I think that's why that was the attraction. It wasn't really me. It was just, kind of cool to be able to get a beer out of the fridge. And nobody raised hell or anything. And so we started dating, and typical high school, break up, get back together, and then going into our freshman year at college, that summer, she got pregnant, and we decided to have an abortion. Uh, However, I got in touch with my mother. She was with stepfather, and he was into he was a big farmer, and he was into yachts, and they were over in the Bahamas. And I tracked her down on the phone number to the bar where the boat was docked, and I get on the phone with her and tell her Eva's pregnant, because in my mind I'm thinking, we're going to get married, and I'm going to farm. I'd already had several buddies. That's just kind of what you do. And when I told her that Eva was pregnant, she said, well, she needs to have an abortion. I had an abortion when I was in college, and y'all don't need to get married. And I was 17. I turned 18 in August of that year. And when you're 17 years old, and that's kind of what you hear from your only uh, support or only person you could talk to about anything, and that's what I got. I called Eva and told her, and she told her mother, and so that was the decision was made that day. And her mother drove her to the doctor, and she had an abortion like that afternoon. And so that was the second great tragedy. And in psychobabble we call that trauma. And so uh, even things got worse, because somewhere in the neighborhood of about 80%, it's in the 80 percentile of women that have abortions suffer from full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder. It's one of the things you don't hear about in all the discussions about abortion, but that's very real. And she had it. Of course, at this time, we didn't know any of this language. All I knew is like, man, she's just spinning. I'm thinking she's lost her mind, because she was fine, with others, but boy, she would just kind of rage with me, and the fights got more intense. But it really was just post-traumatic stress disorder, um, and she's really dealing with complex trauma. Growing up, her father was very involved in the Baptist church and a deacon, and he was also a full-blown alcoholic, and that had an effect on her as well. So we call that complex trauma. And so we rock along in college, and then we decided, well, let's fix it. Let's get married, because that fixes everything, right? And so we got married our senior year, going into our senior year in college, and things kind of went from there. Um, One thing that did happen was I came to Jesus when I was a sophomore in college. And one of the weird things, I grew up in Mississippi, and everybody goes to church in Mississippi. You live like hell during the week, but it's a social event, and you go to church. But my family, we didn't do that. I always say I grew up in the Easter Christian denomination, which that's the largest one in the world. You go to church at Easter, maybe. And so, but for me, it was real because as a 20-year-old frat boy in college, man, I quit drinking, I quit cussing, and I quit smoking because that means you're serious. And I was. And we started going to church and had been involved in church really ever since. And so we get married and then graduated from college and lived in the Mobile, Alabama area, first job. And then we lived there for about 5 years, got transferred to Nashville and then ultimately Atlanta. And we lived in Atlanta for 22 years. And so it was when we were living in Atlanta, we'd been there about a year, and Eve and I are having a just really discussion. We weren't really fighting. And again, we were very involved in church and wearing that mask and wearing it real tight. And we looked good on the outside, right? White picket fence, two babies and dog, and man, perfect. And but on the inside, it was still lots of intensity, and man, it was hard. And Eva just asked me one day, "Why are you so down?" And man, I looked at her, and the words came out of my mouth. I said to her that I have a problem with pornography. Well, I looked around like, who said that? Because there was no way I was ever going to tell her that. I was taking that to my grave. But man, that's what I think. It's just God. God knew what needed to happen. That the truth had to get in. The reality, truth had to get into the light. And there was a whole lot more there. That was just the tip of the iceberg. And just based on that, she loaded up our two little sons who were like 2 and almost 4 at the time. She put them in the car and she came back home to Mississippi to Mama's house. And I am freaking out because there was a whole lot more. My um, acting out had escalated. My mother's attitude was boys will be boys, and we had porn on the bedside table. And this was way before the internet, right? This was, you know, I always tell these young guys, there were these things called magazines that had like ink and paper. It's weird, right? They don't know what that is with this high speed internet porn we have today. And so, but man, those magazines, it hooked me, and that thing was there. And even when I came to Jesus and sincerely wanting to stop, man, it had a hold on me, and it just began to escalate. And my acting out had escalated. I was going to strip joints and massage parlors, and then ultimately prostitutes. And again, Eva had no idea. Nobody did except me, and I was in church, and I would try to do the things that I heard them say, and of course, none of that works. But I was all in, but God had a different plan. He knew what needed to happen, and so
Right.
that was the beginning of just our journey of kind of how we got here. So that's kind of the backstory.
That's powerful, Rome.
Yeah.
That's powerful, and I definitely appreciate that because you just reveal so much. Whenever I hear somebody really reveal themselves like that, it gives me an earnest feeling like they have overcome something as well.
Mm.
Is that true in your case? Have you overcome many of the things that you were just discussing?
Oh man, that's a great question, man. So many guys, and me included, when I first began my journey of recovery and growth and awareness and all of these things, for a period of time, that old temptation was just absolutely, literally gone. And man, as a Christian, you hear the terms of like, I've got victory. I'm a new creation, and the old is gone and the new has come. And I was sincere in believing that. However, there's a term they use in AA. They call it the pink cloud. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's like when a guy finally admits he's an alcoholic and just starts to come clean and own it. There's this effect that they term the pink cloud because it's like, man, it's a whole new world, right? It's kind of, I've stepped out of the darkness into the light, and man, everything's great. And it is for a period of time. And one of the things that happens is, because especially with uh, this sexual chaos, this sexual brokenness, because you've been carrying this secret that you didn't want anybody to know for so long, and now it's just out there, right? And man, there's so much freedom in that. However, when life begins to kind of settle back in, if you're not doing your work, if you're not really digging in and beginning to grow and beginning to build your team of men, other men that get this stuff, that are on the same page, moving in the same direction, and that's just kind of what I call recovery. I just say recovery is just simply the life God intended all of us to live because He built us for connection and He built us to connect with others on deep levels. And when we're hiding and holding secrets and kind of living out of that false self, well, man, we're going to get taken out. And so the work is beginning to build your team, beginning to have men around you that get it, not men that are just going to be the where you become the project. I've been in those groups where everybody's praying for you or holding you accountable or something, and they're not revealing anything. And I always say, don't trust those guys. If you're in a group with guys like that, man, put your hand on your wallet, back out of the room slowly, keep your eyes on them because you can't trust those guys for nothing. You got to have real men that are in the fight, man. This world we live in, this life we live, we're in a war. And if we don't have other men that are in that fight with us, we're going to get taken out. And so that pink cloud effect will last for some period of time, but it's where you better be building your team. You better be beginning to work on your own insight, awareness. How did you get here? Because there's reasons for every behavior, and those are the things that you've got to begin to work on. We just use the term, you've got to begin to start collecting the dots. Then you got to start connecting those dots, and then we're going to start working to correct those dots. And that's just a lifelong process of growth and the journey that we're all on of beginning to become better men, better husbands, better fathers, and really becoming the man that I believe God created us to be. But life happened and we got taken out. But we can recover that, but we can't do it alone.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Reminded me of a scripture in the book of James: confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that you may be healed. I think that, I think this is powerful right here, what you're talking about. And
man, Joel, that verse may be on my tombstone, dude. I love that. I love that verse, right? Because James just tells us, because you hear people talk about a godly man or something, and that conjures up all kinds of images. But James tells us what a godly man is. It's a man living a confessional life. It's a man living transparent, open, intimate, connected with others, free, because he's not hiding in his sin. Right? It's confess, tell it, tell your story. One to another. And then it says the prayers of a righteous man are powerful and effective. So what's a righteous man? A godly man is a man just living a confessional life. I'm growing. I'm certainly not without faults and brokenness and temptation. That's just real as part of life, but I'm not hiding it. I'm living open and confessional. Man, that's how life's meant to be lived, and he tells us that in that one verse. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's the same reason why I believe God loved David so much because
Yes.
David was just that type of he was that type of man that would always confess his fault to God. He would never. So I have a philosophy, and it's not that I teach my children that they should lie to anyone else, but I tell my children, I say there's two things that you must do. I say one, you never lie to yourself, because at some point in time you'll start to believe it, and when you
Oh,
start to believe it, you can't correct it. And two, never lie to God. Because if you
amen.
lie to God, then he won't be there. He will not be able to rescue you or take you up out of it, because he's got to get through your life first. So it's
True.
not that I condone lying to anyone else, but if you can stay away from those two, you shouldn't really need to lie to anyone else, because I also think that lying is a form of fear.
It is.
We lie to
Absolutely.
people because we're afraid of something, a reaction,
Mm.
or the trouble, or the fear. There's a fear in some aspect, so we disguise ourselves.
Uh, we always say the opposite of love. I guess semantically, we would say it's hate, uh, but really, it is fear. Fear is the thing that takes us out because we're afraid to tell the truth. We're afraid to live the truth. We're afraid. And I tell men all the time. One of the things we always say, as a man, one of the things you have to do is begin to identify clearly the fear in your life. And the guy that says, "Man, I'm not afraid of nothing," that's a dangerous guy, and that's just a stupid guy. We've all got fear, right? And so often, you know, facing our wives is like facing the dragon. Man, we're scared to death of her, right? And boy, that fear is one of the things that just takes men out, and we'll go silent, and we'll become passive, and man, the woman will fill that void. She'll become very controlling, and that just goes back to the curse, all the way back to the garden. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. It speaks to that idea of, if when we become passive, Eve wants to fill that void. And so many men, a lot of times, it's just their own shame of things that they've done, and they're afraid to admit and to bring it into the light. But it changes everything.
I think so. I think it's powerful. I think that what you're giving those men on your side, I'm sure Eva is giving her portion to the women, and then you all do kind of like a tag team type of thing when you have those group sessions and those couple sessions. But just from hearing from you, there's a lot of power in this. I was speaking with one of my clients just yesterday, and one of the things that I was mentioning to the individual was, who is there around you that you love and you feel like you can confide in. And I hear the same thing you're saying now, because sometimes we develop this island mentality where every man, every woman, they're an island, and there's nobody else that can help us, and if they were going to attempt to help us, they're probably just judging us anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We always say there's three things that I call them the beaver dams on the river of intimacy. Three things that kill intimacy. And, I always say, especially working with men, when I use the word intimacy, it doesn't mean sex at all.
Right.
Intimacy originally was a spiritual term attributed to God. The Latin root word is intimus, and it,
Close.
it just, it simply means knowing and being known. And somewhere around the 1400s, that word got hijacked and became a euphemism for sex. And it even made its way into Bible translation. And boy, this intimacy thing is, when we get that kind of twisted up with sex, it's problematic. But the three things that kill it: secrets, silence, and judgment. And boy, when we're holding secrets, it's a beaver dam on the river. Us men, our tendency is to go silent. I may have brought something up one time, but she didn't like it, and so man, I went back undercover, right? And then And then judgment, judgment comes in a lot of different forms. Certainly we judge others, but I think one of the worst forms of judgment is how we judge ourselves. And, part of our growth is beginning to learn to judge ourselves rightly. And judgment is just, man, it's an intimacy killer. Because if I come to the show up place, and I just begin to open up and be transparent, and then that person on the other side of the fence starts to like judge me or tell me like, well, why do you feel that way? Why do you think that? I'm just going to start retreating, right? It kills it, because the goal we always talk about is two people in an intimate relationship inviting each other, because it's an invitation, right, to come to that show up place. And when secrets, silence, and judgment are present, connection is not going to happen.
Do you think do you think that this is the reason why Jesus expressed, when speaking with the disciples, he expressed this? He said, he spoke to them. He said, sometimes a friend stick closer than a brother. And because, when you have a family member, they know everything about you. So it automatically feels like judgment. You remember the last conversation. You're like, oh, yeah, you're getting on my back again. But a friend chooses to be with you, chooses to be intimate, chooses to be a close friend with you. And they can decide not to at any point in time. So do you think that is part of the reason why that was stated?
Dude, I think Jesus certainly, man, we've got Jesus so twisted around the axle with just religiosity and even, kind of the institutional church. But, Jesus was the most intelligent human being that ever walked the planet. He was the most well-boundaried man that ever set foot on the planet. And man, Jesus walked around mostly just picking fights, right? I mean, I always think of Jesus as like, hey, Peter, hold my wine, watch this, right? And man, he just rolled those religious types. I mean, every time he shows up, it's so great. It's one reason I love him. And in the modeling and the teaching, I always tell people, man, we are adopted. We are beloved sons and daughters in the family of God, right? That earthly family, that family of origin, those people really become extras. And Jesus affirms that. They come beat on the door. Hey, Jesus, your mom and your brothers are out here. And Jesus looks around the room and he tells them, he says, no, he said, this is my mother. These are my brothers. And so he's telling us in that, man, those family people are the people that are the ones that love you. They don't judge you. They accept you. They encourage you. They certainly kick you in the butt when you need kicking in the butt, right? We all need that. And but Jesus just affirms this over and over again. And it's really, in psychobabble, it's just, we talk about boundaries. Jesus said no all the time. I mean, hey, Jesus, come over here. And Jesus said, no, I'm going over here. And Jesus, come heal these people. He said, no, I'm going this way. And that's boundaries. And, this family stuff can be such a crazy maker, because even the fifth commandment that says, honor your mother and father, man, that will breed this family loyalty. The word honor in our English language is just, man, that's a crazy maker, because I always say, I don't know, what if your mom and dad were like crackheads or something, and they locked you in the closet and threw some food in there, and they'd let you out and burn you with cigarettes and put you back in. I mean, it's an extreme example, but would God say honor that? No way. That's not the nature and character of God. Psalm 27:10 says, when your mother and father forsake you, the Lord will lift you up. It's speaking to this idea of family. And even in the fifth commandment, that word honor, the Hebrew word there is kabed. The Hebrew language is all word pictures. pictograms, and that's why it's so much richer and deeper than our English language. And the picture there is a scale. And what God is saying, even right out of the gate, fifth commandment, honor your mother, father, it's a scale. He's saying, weigh it out. You have to see the good. You have to see the bad. You have to become aware of that because mom and dad are broken, just like you and me. The Old Testament is very clear on the brokenness of the family system. And so God is saying, weigh it out. You've got to become aware of what you did get, what you did not get. And it's got a double meaning because it carries weight. It has impact on every relationship you will be in the rest of your life. And if you don't become aware of what you got, the good, what you didn't get, the bad, the things you needed, you're destined to repeat it. The sins of the fathers, the dysfunction of the fathers, that's what it means, will be passed on and passed on and passed on until somebody decides to take a stand to turn the ship and affect generations to come. And God speaks to this idea of family over and over and over. And we see the dysfunction. That's one reason we love the Bible because, man, God just gives the picture of dysfunction junction in all these crazy families in the Old Testament. David's a prime example, right? Holy cow. It's just amazing. And the Bible is transparent and intimate, knowing and being known. And he gives us, okay, and God still used those crazy people, right? Just like he uses us. And I just think, man, that's the way it works.
And that's all right because I like that. I
Yes.
believe that it is the way that it works. There's a couple things
Amen.
that you put out there too that I don't want us to lose that in the midst of this conversation because I'm enjoying it so much. And that was a few of the things that you're teaching, grow, build, team / connect recovery. And getting over what you had called the pink cloud syndrome, which is the earlier stage of addiction where it involves like a euphoria or elation, but it doesn't last for a long period of time. Or it may last for quite a long period of time. And then once it's gone, though, if you hadn't done those things that you were discussing, if you hadn't grown, if you hadn't if you hadn't made those connections with, we call them changing circles now,
Yes.
changing the circles of individuals into someone or some people where you're heading in a new direction, then you've been falling backwards in a great way.
Absolutely. If you're an eagle and you're kind of flocking with buzzards, you're going to start eating nasty stuff, right? And so you got to change those circles. You got to develop those relationships with other men. Proverbs 31 is that's the biblical passage, the picture of the godly woman. And man, that woman's got it going on, right? I mean, that woman, she is loved. She obviously feels safe and secure because I believe that a woman's greatest need, and if Eva was sitting here, she would tell you the same thing. It is safety and security. And so for her to be who she is, I always like, okay, where's the husband, right? There's one mention of the husband in that passage, and it says that her husband is sitting at the city gates with the elders of the land,
right.
the wise men. I gotta hang around wise men, right? Men that have a clue, not my hunting buddies, my drinking buddies, my golfing buddies, my work buddies, because they're just as clueless as we are until we begin to figure this stuff out. And so it's the sages, it's the wise men, it's the guys that are kind of moving in the direction of life in a real way.
That's powerful that you mentioned that because one of my favorite scriptures actually starts at the very beginning of the Bible, and it's Proverbs, not of the Bible, but of Proverbs,
Yeah.
Proverbs 1:5, where it says, a wise man will hear and will
Mm.
increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. And so the
Amen.
connection there is in the very beginning, this is what a man of understanding should do. And in the very end, I'm going to close it out with the same thing. This reputable woman is with that same man that I was telling you about from the beginning, who
Amen.
is attaining unto wise counsels.
Isn't that it? That's so true, man.
Yeah.
And then, most of Proverbs we attribute to Solomon, and we call him the wisest man that ever lived. And I always say, man, if Solomon had walked into my office and just like, started telling me his story of like, man, because he says he went for it, right? Just all in, wine, women, whatever, anything goes. And if he was telling me about his 1,000 concubines and all this, I'd be going, dude, we got to get you to treatment. You need some help, right? But Solomon's hard-earned life experience is where the wisdom came from.
Right.
And those are the guys that I've got to go be with, right? Yeah, we've done just terrible things, stupid things, but yet I let experience be my teacher, and I began to grow.
I want to key in on that point right there, because I would, for quite some time after I was going through my huge stage of defect, took me 7 years before I really made the decision to come out of that defect. And when I came out of it, it came to me as the amount of time that it takes you to dig yourself into a hole, it may take you that same amount of time or more to get out. And then I was talking with a buddy of mine, my co-host, Michael Seville, and he said, I agree with everything you said except. And I said, He said,
Yeah.
except if they come and they see you, Joel. He said, because if they see you, then maybe they can get out of that hole a lot faster. I think if they see you, Rowan, then they can get out of that hole a lot faster.
That's
if
right.
Seek out wise counsel, it doesn't have to be the same amount of time.
Dude, I say the exact same thing often, right? It's like, man, I just, we talk about the guy in the hole, and he can't get out, and one guy walks by and he says, hey, I'm stuck in this hole, and the guy throws down some hiking boots, says, okay, this'll help, and the guy's like, well, that doesn't do any good. And the next guy comes by and, hey, I'm stuck in this hole, and he throws a manual, how to get out of the hole. And the guy's like, well, that's not helpful. And next guy comes by and he yells up, hey man, I'm stuck in this hole. And this guy jumps down in the hole with him. The guy's like, man, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck in this hole. He says, yeah, but I've been here before and I know the way out, right? And that I think is for those of us that have been in those holes and been in those places. Yeah, it was bad, but man, we figured the way out, and we can help other guys and along the way that are stuck in those same places.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that again goes back to what you were talking about. After you're coming out of your pink cloud, that you need to, in order for you to grow, you have to start building, using those tools that you've learned about, and make sure your connection is strong.
Amen. Even I wound up just, I told her I had a problem with pornography. She leaves based on that. And then she comes back and, I was ready to come clean. And again, this was 1990. Nobody really knew how to work with any of this stuff. We use the term sexual addiction. I've got 2 certifications in that world, and I are one. However, I just hate the term because, man, our whole world today is sexually broken. It's just the whole culture, and man, it's just so we just use the term sexual brokenness. And so I began to reveal to Eva, I'm telling her, more and more, and she's just traumatized every time I reveal new information. And we had a great counselor, but again, nobody knew how to work with this. Dr. Patrick Carnes didn't even, he wrote his book Out of the Shadows, and I think it came out in the mid '80s. So it was all still fairly new. And today there's lots more help available and all of that good stuff. But back then there was nothing. And man, we groped around in the dark. Again, we had probably one of the best counselors at the time. We were in Atlanta, and but still, just not a whole lot of direction around this. Nobody was working with betrayal trauma. Nobody even was talking about that until around the year 2000. And so, man, it was bad. And so it was just it was really hard. And we wound up and we divorced, and we were apart for a little over a year. Eva had what she calls her grace awakening during that divorce. She went to an adult children of alcoholics meeting at the encouragement of her mother, and they gave her what's called the 14 characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And she looks at that thing and she checks every one of the boxes. And it was then when kind of the light bulb went off that like she had some of her own stuff that she needed to work on. We would go to counseling in those 2 years before the divorce, and it was like, um, I'm fine. We're here because of him. He's the problem. Fix him. And that doesn't go well. Not much happens in counseling when that's going on. But kind of the light bulb came on for her, and then she engaged with her counselor in a more of a real way, deeper way, and I was, man, when I was all in because this thing that was inside of me, I wanted freedom, and I was engaged with my counselor. I was in his therapy group. I was in a support and recovery ministry, one of the first Christ-centered recovery ministries in the country, started in Atlanta, and I was a part of that. And I was all in. Even when we divorced, I think that was one of the things that Eva saw. I was, man, I wanted to be a better man. I wanted to recover the life that God intended me to live. And and so we began to talk, and we reconciled and remarried, and and then we committed to doing our own work. We sat on that couch in Atlanta for years, and we were involved in our support groups, recovery groups together. And I always tell people, if you're looking for a counselor, probably the first and best question you can ask them is like, tell me about the work that you've done. And if they just tell you they read something in a book and they went to some graduate school, and that's what they know, then you probably just need to keep looking,
That's right.
because if they haven't done their work, chances are they're going to do more harm than good.
That's right.
And I say that unabashedly because I've just heard so many horror stories. I've started calling it helper trauma. When somebody went to see somebody and they got they got worse, it didn't it was worse than what they got from when they walked in the door. That's very real. Um, and so that's why we do what we do today. And in our process of just, I mean, and, I think I said earlier, I was in the corporate salt mines, man. But we were always involved in our church, and people knew our story. We were very open about that and spoke about that in different settings, and pastors would send people to us, right? And so I've been working with men, and Eva's been working with women, and we've been working with couples. It's just now we get paid for it. I get to make a living doing it, which is yeah. I mean, I just, man, God's. It's when it's kind of when calling, skill set, abilities, and passion align, and that's just kind of where we are today, and just the work that we do. And you know specifically with couples that are dealing with this sexual brokenness. That's what our book is about. It's just our process that we take a couple through. Because one of the things we learned is that, when this stuff comes out, when discovery happens, all hell breaks loose, right? Um, I always say we're kind of like we're hell fighters. There's no movie about John Wayne did about the story of Red Adair. They were the teams that back in the day when the oil wells were on fire, they were the guys that just went straight into those fires and put those suckers out. And that's kind of where we are at crisis level in a relationship, because we always say, I don't believe there's any greater crisis in a relationship. Maybe the death of a child, certainly. But as far as the coupleship, there's no greater crisis. And we're charging the gates of hell with a water pistol. Well, I think we have a fire hose today because of just where we've been. And so, because when a couple comes in and they're just, man, they're both spinning, when we can look at them and say, look, we don't know where this thing's going to wind up. But one thing we can tell you, if you're willing to do this work and you're willing to work this process, you will have a chance, not only for the marriage to survive, but possibly actually thrive. It
Yeah.
may be, this may be the thing that gets you to the place that you wanted to be at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautifully stated. Listen, Rome, I want to cover one more thing.
Yeah.
So we're going a little bit long. I hope you don't mind.
No, dude, I'm good.
So this will be the last question that I'll have for you.
Yeah.
And it's because you open the door up to pornography. And the thing is, there's tons of people out there. So, maybe in a few words or a few steps, if you could explain how you made it out, or what are some techniques that somebody listening could utilize
Oh,
to
yeah.
get out of pornography.
Man, Joe, today, this high speed internet porn, man, it's the real pandemic. It's just too easy. It's too accessible. And I mean, it's just, guys are getting taken out with this thing left and right. We stumble into it, I mean, it's kind of like in man world, porn is like air and water, right?
Mm.
And man, it's just such a bill of goods. And you get to some point where you kind of begin to realize, man, this thing is just it on some level, it's killing me, literally, because it's certainly killing our soul. And so I always talk about the practical, right? Man, we got to get practical with this stuff. So if it's a high speed internet porn problem, well, there's one thing in that statement that you can do something about. We can begin to limit access, and there's all kind of ways to do that. Just like they have accountability software. There's filters. You can get a flip phone. Man, I'm old, right? I remember we had these things called pay phones. You can actually live life without one of those things tied to your hand. It's amazing. Uh, you can get rid of the internet. I mean, there's all kind of ways that you got to get practical, and you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to go to any length, because the number one thing that has to happen is just what I would call sobriety. You've got to get real. You've got to get honest, and then you got to get sober. And so the practical things is certainly developing your team of guys. You got to get connected with other men. It is essential. I always say, the four most dangerous words in the English language, just me and Jesus, right? That just tells me that's an isolated guy. That's a disconnected man, and he doesn't have a chance. And Jesus didn't, everything Jesus talked about, even when he taught us to pray, there's no I or me statements in that Lord's Prayer, right? It's it's us, it's we, it's one another. So I've got to get connected with other men that get this, that are moving in the same direction. It's essential. And so, those practical things that we all need to do, uh, and I mean, it's just, I'm willing to go to any length in order to deal with this thing, because it's so addictive with this high speed internet porn, because of the novelty and the variety aspect of it. It's called the Coolidge Effect in psychobabble, and it has to do with the novelty and the variety, and the pleasure center, the sexual part of the pleasure center. With the novelty and the variety that we have, it's endless. And so the sexual part of the pleasure center of the brain, the nucleus accumbens, is never satiated. It's like with food, which is part of the pleasure center of the brain. And I can only eat so many Krispy Kreme donuts. I love Krispy Kreme donuts, right? But I don't know. I'd like to test it one day. But I know at some point I'm going to be puking my guts out, right? There's a governor on it. But with this Coolidge effect and the sexual pleasure center of the brain, it it's never satiated. You can orgasm, 2 times, 3 times, 5 times. I'm older, but these young guys, but they can keep going. But the brain is still running with this, and it's the next one and the next one and the next one, and it's endless. And that's why it's so highly addictive, compulsive with this thing. It all has to do with the brain. It's really very little to do with sex.
Powerful. So, limit access, we're talking about software, hardware, develop a team of guys with like passions that want to exit, pornography. And then, the number one thing I guess should have been said first was have a mindset change, completely be willing to do whatever it takes to be free.
We admit, right? Step number one in the 12 steps, we admit that we were powerless. Like, this thing's got me. It's got me.
Dead
And
right.
I always say, I've told pastors before, like, man, you cannot pray your way out of something that you have behaved your way into. It's behavioral, and this thing is a powerful behavioral, physiological, neurological process that we have conditioned over a long period of time. And to think that somehow I'm going to just pray it away, man, I, Jesus doesn't tell us that.
That is a powerful statement. You cannot pray your way out of something you have behaved your way into. I definitely appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that.
Believe me, I tried. It doesn't work.
I will quote you on that, Roane. I'm
Good.
going to mention that. I will quote you on that. That we're going to put that up on the Tenacity Foundation, because I think that is something powerful that people need to hear and need to understand. I love your authenticity. I love the fact that you have a wealth of knowledge. I love the fact that no matter how many times you dipped your ladle into your wealth, your fountain wealth, that there was still something left there to give. And I could tell because your cup's running over. I appreciate you. And I want to give you an opportunity to say a short statement that you'd like to leave a lasting thought with everyone, and maybe put a plug in for your organization.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we always close these out. Man, the one thing certainly that I just want to say is, man, wherever you are, whatever's going on, you're not alone. We're all in this thing together. There's others that have been where you are, and there's lots of hope. And then the thing that we always really kind of close with is the cure for whatever ails you, whatever ails any of us. The cure is connection. That's the reality. And so, if just for more information, our book, any of that, Our website that we point people to is the website is just simply Sex God Chaos, all one word, sexgodchaos.com. And there's more information there. There's links to the books on Amazon, all that good stuff. And so, and then we just started our own podcast, and it's called the Sex, God, and Chaos Podcast. So I think we're putting maybe the second episode is out there today, and I think it's going to be a great resource as well. And like I told you, I look forward to when you're going to be on that with us. So
I look forward to
appreciate
it
you,
as
man.
well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you once again. This is Roane Hunter. I'm almost blown away. The amount of wealth that Roane was able to give us and what he was able to share. I can only imagine what would have happened if his wife was sitting right there with him at the same time, and how much more this would have been, how much more content we would have had, and more lessons there would have been to learn for each and every last one of us, especially from the woman's perspective. I look forward to having them back on this show again later on. And then maybe we'll be able to have that second conversation from a woman's perspective as well. But I just think that it was very authentic, and I was very grateful. A couple of things that Roane said: you can't pray your way out of something you have behaved your way into. That's powerful. That's powerful. Another thing that he said is that in his mind, when he began to start to desire to make that change, he said he wanted to be a better man. He wasn't willing to just give up. He wanted to be a better man. I think that is where I can draw in our title of this show, because as much as it starts with you, it starts with me. Peace.